The cantina reeked of alien sweat and spilled. Synthahol when Captain Brick Thornfield slid the datapad across the scarred metal table. Damon Cross didn't look up from cleaning his rifle, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision over the weapon that had never failed him in 15 years of hunting the galaxy's most dangerous prey. "This one's different," Brick said, his voice barely audible over the noise of a dozen alien species drowning their sorrows. "Not your usual scum and villainy." Damon finally glanced at the pad, his steel-gray eyes scanning the holographic image that materialized above it. A woman's face appeared, but not human. Her skin held an ethereal blue-white glow, like starlight captured in flesh. High cheekbones framed large, luminous eyes that seemed to hold the depth of nebulae. Silver hair cascaded over shoulders that suggested both delicacy and strength. "Princess Valerian Nethys of the Ethereal Empire," Brick continued. "Kidnapped 3 days ago during a diplomatic summit on Kepler Station. The rebels who took her call themselves the Liberation Front, but they're really just terrorists with delusions of grandeur." Damon's fingers paused on his rifle's scope. "What's the pay?" "Enough to buy your own planet." Brick leaned forward. "The Ethereal Empire doesn't negotiate with terrorists, but they'll pay any price to get their princess back alive. Queen Seraphina made that very clear." The bounty hunter studied the image more carefully. There was something in the princess's expression, even in a static hologram, that suggested fire beneath the ethereal beauty, intelligence, strength, not the pampered royal he'd expected. "Where are they holding her?" "Asteroid mining facility in the Vega Rim, heavily fortified. The rebels have been using it as their base for months." Brick slid another datapad across the table. "Full schematics, guard rotations, everything my contacts could gather." Damon reviewed the information with the methodical attention that kept him alive in a profession where most hunters died young. The facility was a fortress carved from solid rock, surrounded by defensive turrets and shielded by energy barriers. A conventional assault would require a fleet. "I work alone," Damon said finally. "I know. That's why you're the only one who might pull this off." Brick stood, leaving both datapads on the table. "The princess has been missing for 3 days. Every hour increases the chances they'll decide she's more valuable dead than alive as a political symbol." After Brick left, Damon remained in the cantina for another hour, memorizing every detail of the facility's layout. He'd infiltrated rebel strongholds before, but never to rescue alien royalty. The mission parameters were unusual, but the fundamentals remained the same. Get in, secure the target, get out alive. 2 days later, Damon's modified stealth ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the asteroid field. The mining facility loomed ahead, a mechanical cancer grafted onto the dead rock. His sensors counted 47 life signs inside, all clustered in the habitable sections. Finding the princess would be the easy part. Getting her out would test every skill he'd learned in 2 decades of war and hunting. Damon suited up in his battered combat armor, checking each weapon with ritualistic care. His plasma rifle hung across his back, sidearms secured at his hips, and his grandfather's compound bow strapped to his thigh. Other hunters mocked the primitive weapon, but Damon had learned that sometimes old ways worked best. Arrows were silent, left no energy signature, and could be crafted from almost any material. The approach required 3 hours of patient maneuvering through the asteroid field, using the space rocks as cover while his ship's stealth systems masked his thermal signature. He docked at a maintenance airlock that his intelligence suggested was rarely monitored inside the facility. The air was thick and recycled, heavy with the metallic taste of industrial filtration systems. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the constant rumble of mining equipment provided audio cover for his movement. Damon moved through the corridors like a shadow, his enhanced hearing picking up conversations and footsteps long before potential threats could spot him. The facility's layout matched his intelligence, but intelligence never captured the full reality of a place. The smell of fear and desperation seemed to permeate the walls. He found her in a converted storage bay deep in the facility's heart. The door was secured by an electronic lock that took him 40 seconds to bypass. Inside, Princess Valeria sat on a makeshift cot, her royal garments torn, but her posture unbowed. When the door opened, she looked up with eyes that held no fear, only calculation. "You're not one of them," she said, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his bones. "No, I'm not." Damon stepped inside, his weapon ready. "I'm here to get you out." She studied him with an intensity that was almost physical. Her gaze moved from his scarred armor to the weapons he carried, lingering on the ancient bow. "Human. Last time I checked." He moved to the door, listening for approaching footsteps. "We need to move. Can you walk?" "I can do more than walk." Valeria stood, and Damon felt something change in the air around them. The metal bolts securing her chains to the wall began to vibrate, then snapped with sharp pings. "I was waiting for the right moment." Damon stared as the chains fell away from her wrists without her touching them. Telekinetic, among other things. She moved toward him, and he caught the scent of her skin, something like ozone and flowers that existed only in dreams. "What's your name, Hunter?" "Damon Cross. We can exchange life stories later. Right now, we need to reach my ship." They moved through the facility's corridors with Damon leading, his enhanced senses alert for threats. Behind him, Valeria moved with a grace that seemed to defy gravity, her bare feet silent on the metal floor. Twice, guards appeared ahead of them, and twice they collapsed unconscious before Damon could raise his weapon. "Useful skill," he murmured. "My people are not helpless decorations," she replied, a hint of steel in her musical voice. They reached the docking level without raising an alarm, but their luck ran out at the airlock. A squad of rebels waited in ambush, weapons trained on the corridor entrance. Damon counted 6 hostiles, too many for a frontal assault in the confined space. "Stay behind me," he told Valeria, drawing his bow. "Wait." She placed a hand on his arm, and he felt an electric shock at the contact that had nothing to do with her abilities. "Let me help." Before he could protest, she stepped around him into the corridor. The rebels shouted commands, but their weapons suddenly turned in their hands, barrels twisting toward the ceiling. In the confusion, Damon's arrows found their marks with lethal precision. 3 rebels fell before the others could adapt their malfunctioning weapons. The remaining 3 charged with melee weapons, but Damon was already moving. His knife found the first rebel's throat, while his other hand drew a sidearm. The second rebel fell to a point-blank plasma bolt, and the third found himself lifted off the ground by an invisible force before being slammed into the wall hard, enough to crack the metal plating. "Impressive," Valeria said, studying the aftermath of their brief, violent ballet. "Likewise." Damon led her to his ship's airlock. "Though next time, warn me before you start bending reality. Reality is more flexible than most people realize." She followed him into the ship, and he sealed the airlock behind them. "Especially when you understand the forces that bind it." As Damon's ship powered away from the asteroid facility, he became aware of Valeria watching him from the co-pilot's seat. Her presence seemed to fill the small cockpit with an energy that made his skin tingle. "Why did you come for me?" she asked as the stars wheeled around them. "I was hired to." "That's not what I asked." Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in his chest. "You could have sent the location to a military strike team and collected a finder's fee. Instead, you came alone into a heavily fortified position to face unknown odds." "Why?" Damon's hands moved over the flight controls, setting course for the Jewel. Coordinates Brick had provided. The honest answer was complicated. involving pride and principle, and a lifetime of choosing the harder path because it felt right. But looking at her now, he realized there might be another reason, one he didn't fully understand yet. Someone needed help, he said finally. And you always help those who need it? When I can. She was quiet for a long moment, studying his profile, as he piloted them through hyperspace. You're not what I expected when I heard the ethereal empire had hired a human bounty hunter. What did you expect? Someone crude, violent, motivated only by profit. She shifted in her seat, and he caught another hint of that impossible scent. Instead, I find a man who risks his life for principle and carries weapons from his world's ancient past alongside tools from its future. Damon glanced at the bow secured beside his seat. Old doesn't always mean obsolete. No, she agreed, her voice soft. Sometimes old means proven, tested, reliable in ways that newer things are not. The subtext in her words sent heat through his veins, but he kept his focus on the controls. She was alien royalty, and he was a human hunter. Their worlds were separated by more than just distance. Tell me about your people, she said. What drives humans to such extremes of courage and stubbornness? We don't like being told what we can't do. He adjusted their course slightly, buying time to think. And we tend to get attached to things, people, places, ideas. Sometimes that attachment makes us do stupid things, or heroic things. Usually, both, she laughed, a sound like silver bells in a gentle wind. I think I'm beginning to understand why the galaxy fears humans almost as much as it admires them. Do you fear me? The question came out before he could stop it. Valeria was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. No, she said, but I think I should. The rest of the journey to the rendezvous point passed in charged silence, both of them acutely aware of the other's presence in a confined space. Damon found himself stealing glances at her, memorizing the way starlight from the viewports played across her luminous skin. Several times he caught her watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between curiosity and hunger. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace at the rendezvous coordinates, a sleek ethereal Empire cruiser was already waiting. The sight of it broke the spell that had been building between them, reminding them both of the vast differences in their stations. This is where we part ways, Damon said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Yes. Valeria stood, moving toward the airlock. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at him. Thank you, Damon Cross, for risking your life for a stranger. You're welcome, Your Highness. She smiled at the formal title, but there was sadness in it. Perhaps we'll meet again, under better circumstances. Perhaps. She was almost through the airlock when she turned back one more time. Damon, when you were fighting to rescue me, what were you thinking about? The question caught him off guard. He could have given her a dozen tactical answers, but something in her expression demanded honesty. I was thinking, he said slowly, that someone that beautiful shouldn't be caged. Her eyes widened, and for a moment the careful control she maintained over her abilities slipped. Every loose object in the cockpit rose slightly off its surface before settling back down. Goodbye, Damon, she whispered, and then she was gone. As her ship disappeared into hyperspace, Damon remained in his pilot's seat, staring at the empty space where it had been. The scent of ozone and dream flowers lingered in his ship's recycled air, and he found himself wondering if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life by letting her go. But the job was done. The princess was safe, and soon his account would reflect payment enough to retire in comfort. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like loss. 3 weeks after delivering Princess Valeria to the ethereal Empire ship, Damon Cross sat in the same cantina where Captain Brick Thornfield had first offered him the job. The payment had cleared, more credits than he'd ever seen in one account. But instead of the satisfaction he'd expected, he felt hollow. Every woman who approached his table seemed pale and ordinary compared to luminous skin and eyes that held. The depth of space itself, the cantina's main screen flickered to life, displaying a news broadcast from the core worlds. Damon looked up from his drink just as Princess Valeria's image appeared, her ethereal beauty somehow diminished by the flat recording technology. Princess Valeria Nethys of the Ethereal Empire announced her engagement today to Lord Commander Theron of the Galactic Defense Force, the newsreader reported. The union is expected to strengthen military ties between the Empire and the Alliance worlds. The wedding is scheduled for next month on the Empire's capital world of Lumina Prime. Damon's glass shattered in his grip. He stared at the blood, welling from small cuts on his palm, using the physical pain to distract from something much deeper. Around him, the cantina's patrons continued their conversations, oblivious to the fact that his world had just tilted off its axis. "Rough break," said a familiar voice. Damon looked up to see Captain Brick sliding into the opposite seat. "Didn't expect to see you here. Figured you'd be on some paradise world by now, living off that Imperial payment. Maybe I like the scenery. Here." Damon wrapped a bar napkin around his bleeding hand. "Or maybe you're sulking, because the princess is marrying someone else." Brick signaled the bartender for 2 drinks. "Word of advice, don't fall for the clients. It never ends well." "I'm not." "Sure you're not." The drinks arrived, and Brick slid one across the table. "That's why you're bleeding on furniture in a dive cantina instead of enjoying your retirement." Before Damon could respond, his communication device chimed with an encrypted message. He almost ignored it, but the sender's code made him freeze. It was an ethereal Empire frequency, one that shouldn't have existed outside official diplomatic channels. The message was simple. "Cargo Bay 7, docking level 3. Come alone." V. Damon stared at the device, wondering if he was hallucinating. Valeria was supposed to be on Lumina Prime, preparing for her wedding to a man she'd probably never met before the engagement was announced. "I have to go," he said, standing abruptly. "Damon." Brick's voice carried a warning. "Whatever this is, think twice. Royal politics make our line of work look safe." But Damon was already moving, pushing through the cantina's crowd toward the docking levels. His heart hammered against his ribs as he made his way through the station's bowels, past maintenance areas and cargo holds that reeked of industrial lubricants and alien spices. Cargo Bay 7 was dark when he arrived, lit only by the glow of control panels and the distant stars visible through the transparent aluminum viewports. He'd almost decided the message was some kind of trap when movement in the shadows caught his eye. Princess Valeria stepped into the light, but she looked nothing like the composed royal from the news broadcast. Her silver hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore the kind of nondescript traveling clothes that suggested someone trying not to be recognized. The ethereal glow of her skin seemed dimmed, as if suppressed by some internal struggle. "You came," she said, and her voice carried relief mixed with something that might have been surprise. "Your Highness." Damon maintained a respectful distance, though every instinct screamed at him to close the gap between them. "I thought you were on Lumina Prime. I was supposed to be." She moved closer, and he caught that intoxicating scent again. Ozone and impossible flowers. "I left. Told my security detail I needed time for private meditation before the ceremony. They think I'm locked in the palace's spiritual chambers. And instead you're here. Instead I'm here." She stopped just outside arm's reach, her luminous eyes searching his face. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. About caging beautiful things." Damon's mouth went dry. "Valeria, I've never made a choice for myself," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Every decision in my life has been made by others. My education, my duties, my schedule, even my marriage. All decided by people who think they know what's best for the Empire. Sometimes duty requires sacrifice. Does it? She stepped closer, and now he could see the conflict in her expression, desire warring with responsibility. Or does it just require us to convince ourselves that we don't deserve happiness? The space between them crackled with tension. Damon found himself memorizing every detail of her face, the way her lips parted slightly when she breathed, the faint luminescence. That seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Why are you here, Valeria? Because I needed to know. Her hand rose as if to touch his face, then stopped just short of contact. I needed to know if what I felt during our escape was real, or just adrenaline and gratitude. And, standing here, now, looking at you, she swallowed hard. It's real. More real than anything I've ever felt before. Damon closed his eyes, fighting against every instinct that told him to pull her into his arms. You're engaged to another man, to a political arrangement. I've never even spoken to Theron except at formal ceremonies. Her voice carried a bitterness. That sat strangely on someone so young. Do you know what he said when our engagement was announced? He said he was honored to acquire such a valuable political asset. Valeria, don't. Her control slipped again, and the metal containers around them groaned softly as invisible forces pressed against them. Don't tell me about duty and sacrifice and what's best for the Empire. I've heard it all my life. Instead of speaking, Damon reached out and took her hand. The moment their skin made contact, she gasped, and he felt electricity race up his arm and straight to his heart. Her abilities seemed to respond to the touch, creating a field of energy around them that made his hair stand on end. I'm just a human bounty hunter, he said quietly. You're alien royalty. There's no scenario where this ends well for either of us. I know. Tears had begun to gather in her luminous eyes, and they caught the starlight like captured diamonds. But I had to try. I had to know what it would feel like to choose for myself, just once. They stood there in the dim cargo bay, hands clasped, both of them balanced on the edge of a decision that would change everything. Around them, the station hummed with life, but in that moment, they might have been the only two people in the galaxy. Come with me, Valeria said suddenly. What? Leave this place. We'll find somewhere they can't reach us, somewhere we can be together without politics or duty or arrangements. Her grip on his hand tightened. I have access to Imperial funds, resources they'll never think to trace. We could disappear. The offer hung in the air between them, like a promise and a curse. Damon found himself seriously considering it, imagining a life where he woke up next to this incredible woman every morning, where her laughter was the first sound he heard and her voice the last, before sleep. But reality had a way of intruding on even the most beautiful dreams. They'd never stop hunting us, he said finally. Your people would consider it kidnapping, treason, maybe both. And my people. He thought of Brick, of the other hunters who'd become his loose family over the years. I'd be throwing away everything I've built, so we'd be outcasts. Valeria's voice carried a fierce determination. Is that so terrible? To be outcasts together rather than prisoners apart. Before he could answer, alarms began to sound throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the cargo bay in pulsing red, and the station's communication system crackled to life. Attention all personnel. This station is now under Imperial jurisdiction. All docking bays are sealed pending a security sweep. Repeat, this station is under Imperial lockdown. Valeria's face went pale, her ethereal glow dimming further. They found me. Through the viewport, Damon could see Imperial ships taking position around the station, their sleek hulls bristling with weapons. They'd been tracked somehow, probably through the encrypted message system she'd used to contact him. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they breach this section," Damon said, his hunter's instincts taking over. "There's a maintenance airlock 3 levels down that connects to the asteroid mining tunnels. If we can reach it." "No." Valeria's voice was filled with resignation. "I won't make you a fugitive for my sake. Valeria, I have to go back." She turned to face him fully, and he saw that she'd made her decision. "If I run now, it won't just be me they punish. My mother will face pressure from the other imperial houses, possibly even civil war. Thousands could die because I wanted to be selfish. Wanting to be happy isn't selfish. It is when you're born to responsibility." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "But thank you for showing me what happiness could feel like." The cargo bay's main door began to hiss open. Imperial guards would be through it in moments, and with them the end of whatever this had been between them. "I love you," Valeria said, the words rushing out as if she'd been holding them back too long. "I know it's impossible and foolish and completely impractical, but I needed you to know. Valeria, remember me," she whispered, then stepped back as the first Imperial guards entered the bay. They were magnificent in their ceremonial armor, faces hidden behind gleaming masks that reflected the cargo bay's lights. Their leader, a tall figure, with the bearing of nobility, removed his helmet to reveal features that were classically handsome in the ethereal way, all sharp angles and luminous skin. "Your Highness," he said, his voice carrying relief and reproach in equal measure. "Lord Commander Theron has been quite concerned about your disappearance." "Has he?" Valeria's composure returned like armor sliding into place. "How considerate of my fiancé to worry about his political asset." If Theron caught the barb, he gave no sign. His gaze moved to Damon, taking in the hunter's scarred armor and the primitive weapons he carried. "This is the human who rescued you from the terrorists," Theron said. It wasn't quite a question. "Damon Cross," Valeria confirmed. "I contacted him to thank him properly for his service to the Empire." It was a plausible lie, delivered with royal authority. Theron seemed to accept it, though his eyes remained cold as they studied Damon. "The Empire is grateful for your service," Theron said formally. "Please consider yourself welcome at our wedding ceremony next month." The invitation was clearly meant as a dismissal, but also as a subtle cruelty. Damon recognized the game, show the inferior human exactly what he could never have, rub his face in the vast gulf between their stations. "Thank you," Damon replied evenly, "but I'll be busy, of course." Theron's smile was perfect and empty. "Come, Valeria. We have a great deal to discuss." As the Imperial party prepared to leave, Valeria looked back one last time. Her eyes met Damon's, and in them he saw a promise and a plea. "Remember me. Remember this. Remember that for one brief moment we chose each other over duty and politics and the weight of worlds." Then she was gone, swept away by guards and protocol and the inexorable machinery of Imperial power. Damon stood alone in the cargo bay, surrounded by the fading scent of ozone and impossible flowers, and wondered how something so brief could leave such a permanent scar on his soul. The station's lockdown lasted another hour before the Imperial ships departed, taking with them the only woman who had ever made him consider giving up the life he'd built. When normal operations resumed, Damon made his way back to the cantina, ordered the strongest drink they had, and tried to convince himself that he'd done the right thing. But late that night, alone in his ship with the stars wheeling past his viewport, he found himself planning impossible rescues and imagining different endings to their story. He told himself it was just the alcohol, or loneliness, or the natural human tendency to want what he couldn't have. Deep down, though, he knew the truth. Princess Valeria had gotten under his skin in a way that no amount of time or distance would cure. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, on a world he'd never seen, she was preparing to marry a man she didn't love, while thinking of a human hunter who'd shown her what choice felt like. The thought should have filled him with despair. Instead, it filled him with something far more dangerous: hope. The wedding of Princess Valeria Nethys was to be the social event of the decade, broadcast across 1,000 worlds and attended by dignitaries from every major power in the galaxy. Damon Cross watched the preliminary coverage from a bar on Kepler Station, nursing a drink that had long since gone warm, while news anchors gushed about the political significance of the union. The ceremony will take place in the Crystal Cathedral on Lumina Prime, the reporter announced over footage of the massive structure that seemed to be carved from a single enormous diamond. Lord Commander Theron has spared no expense in demonstrating the Empire's wealth and power. Damon was about to switch off the feed when a familiar figure appeared on screen. Captain Brick Thornfield dropped into the opposite seat, his expression unreadable. "You're not seriously watching this," Brick said. "Just keeping current on galactic politics." Damon's voice was carefully neutral. "Right," Brick signaled the bartender. "That's why you've been drinking in this same bar for 3 weeks, ever since the Imperial ships left. I'm between jobs." "You're between sanity and stupidity, is what you're between." Brick's drink arrived, and he took a long pull before speaking again. "I've got something that might interest you. Freelance security work for a mining consortium on the Rim. Good pay, minimal politics, and it's about as far from Lumina Prime as you can get without leaving the galaxy." Damon was about to respond when the news feed changed. Instead of the standard wedding coverage, an emergency bulletin flashed across the screen. The anchor's perfect composure cracked as she read from a datapad that had just been handed to her. "We are receiving reports of an attack on the Imperial Palace on Lumina Prime. Rebel forces led by Lord Kavek have apparently seized control of the Crystal Cathedral and are holding Princess Valeria hostage. Lord Commander Theron was reportedly killed in the initial assault." The bar fell silent as patrons absorbed the news. On screen, shaky footage showed smoke rising from the palace complex, while Imperial ships battled rebel fighters in the skies. Above, the rebels are demanding the immediate abdication of Queen Seraphina and the dissolution of the Imperial government. The anchor continued. "They claim Princess Valeria will be executed if their demands are not met within 24 hours. Damon was moving before conscious thought caught up with instinct. He threw credits on the table and headed for the door, his mind already calculating hyperspace routes to Lumina Prime. "Damon, wait." Brick caught up with him in the corridor. "You can't be serious about this. She's in danger. She's not your responsibility anymore. Hell, she was never your responsibility to begin with." Brick grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. "You're one man with a bow and arrow. What do you think you can accomplish against an army of rebels holding a fortress?" "I'll figure it out. You'll get yourself killed. And for what?" She was going to marry another man anyway. She made her choice. Damon turned to face his old friend, and Brick stepped back at what he saw in the hunter's eyes. "No, she didn't. That's the whole point. She never got to choose anything for herself. So now you're going to ride to the rescue like some kind of storybook hero?" "I'm going to give her the chance to choose." Damon resumed walking toward the docking bays. "Maybe choose duty and sacrifice, and what's best for the Empire. But at least it'll be her choice to make." Brick fell into step beside him. "This is insane, probably. The Imperial fleet will blast you out of space before you get within a light year of Lumina Prime. Maybe. And even if you somehow make it to the surface, you'll be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. I've faced worse odds." Brick was quiet for a moment as they reached Damon's ship. "No, you haven't. Not even close." Damon paused at his ships. Airlock, his hand on the control panel. I know, but I have to try. Why? Brick's voice carried genuine confusion. Why throw your life away for an alien princess who can never be yours? The question hung in the air between them. Damon could have given a dozen answers, all of them true in their own way. Because he'd promised to protect her. Because she deserved. Better than being a political pawn. Because the thought of her dying afraid and alone made something inside him want to burn the galaxy down. But the real answer was simpler and more complicated than any of those. Because I love her, he said, quietly, and sometimes that's reason enough. The journey to Lumina Prime took 18 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity. Damon spent the time preparing his equipment and studying everything he could find about the Crystal Cathedral's layout. The structure was a marvel of ethereal architecture, grown rather than built from a single massive crystal formation. Its walls were transparent, but stronger than military-grade armor, and its interior was a maze of chambers and passages that followed no human logic dot as his ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Lumina system. Damon found himself staring at a scene from a nightmare. The normally pristine blue-white world was scarred with the orange glow of fires, and the space around it swarmed with battling ships. Imperial vessels engaged rebel fighters in desperate combat, while larger ships hammered the palace complex. With bombardments that lit up the night side of the planet, Damon's communications array crackled to life as he approached the outer system. Unknown vessel, this is Imperial Command. You are entering a restricted war zone. Identify yourself immediately, or you will be fired upon. This is Damon Cross, independent contractor, he replied, keeping his voice steady. I'm here to assist. With the hostage situation. There was a pause, then a different voice came on the channel. Mr. Cross, this is Admiral Kerensky. We have orders to provide you with any assistance you require by direct command of Queen Serafina herself. That was unexpected. Damon had assumed he'd have to fight his way through Imperial security to reach the planet. I need a stealth insertion to the palace complex. Can you provide cover? Negative. The cathedral is surrounded by rebel anti-aircraft. Batteries. Any ship approaching the surface will be destroyed. The Admiral's voice carried the weight of someone who'd already lost too many good people. However, we can provide you with detailed intelligence on rebel positions and create a distraction to mask your approach. That'll have to do. The intelligence packet that followed painted a grim picture. Lord Kavik had indeed seized the crystal. Cathedral, with a force of nearly 200 rebels, heavily armed and fanatically loyal to their cause. They'd turned the sacred building into a fortress, with Princess Valeria held in the highest spire where her execution would be visible to the Imperial forces surrounding the complex. But there was opportunity in the chaos. The rebels had focused their defenses on the main approaches, leaving the maintenance tunnels and service passages relatively unguarded. It was the kind of oversight that came from thinking like soldiers, instead of hunters. Damon's ship slipped through the battle-torn atmosphere under cover of an Imperial bombing run that lit up the sky with false dawn. He set down in the ruins of a residential district 3 kilometers from the palace, using the twisted wreckage of buildings as camouflage for his landing. The journey to the palace took him through streets that had once been showcases of ethereal artistry, now reduced to rubble and ash. Bodies lay scattered where they'd fallen, both civilian and military, their luminous skin faded to gray in death. The sight filled him with a cold rage that settled in his bones like winter. He reached the palace complex as the first moon rose, its silver light turning the crystal cathedral into a beacon visible from orbit. The building pulsed with its own inner radiance, but something was wrong with the harmonics. Instead of the pure musical tones that ethereal crystals normally produced, this one sang with discord and pain. The maintenance tunnels were exactly where the intelligence reports had indicated, hidden beneath decorative gardens that had been blasted into smoking craters. Damon made his way through the underground passages with the patient stealth of a predator, his enhanced senses alert for any sign of guards or traps. The rebels had been sloppy. They'd posted sentries at the main tunnel junctions, but ignored the smaller passages that honeycombed the cathedral's foundation. Damon moved through the forgotten spaces like a ghost, following service maps that led him deeper into the building's heart. He found the first group of hostages in what had once been a preparation chamber for wedding ceremonies. 23 ethereal nobles and their servants, bound and guarded by 3 rebels who looked bored with their assignment. Damon's arrows took all 3 guards down in silence, and he quickly freed the prisoners. "Princess Valeria," he whispered to the eldest noble. "Where are they holding her?" "The Harmony Spire," the noble replied, his voice shaking with relief and fear. "At the very top of the cathedral. Lord Kavik plans to broadcast her execution at dawn." Dawn was still hours away, but Damon could feel time running out like sand through his fingers. He left the freed hostages with instructions to find their way to the tunnels and make for the Imperial lines. Then began his ascent through the cathedral's interior. The Crystal Cathedral was a maze of interconnected chambers, each one flowing into the next with the organic logic of grown crystal. Damon moved through them like a shadow, avoiding the main passages where rebel patrols moved with increasing frequency as he climbed higher. He encountered more hostages along the way, small groups of wedding guests and palace staff who'd been caught in the initial attack. Each group he freed was another small victory, but also another delay in reaching Valeria. The rebels were starting to notice the missing guards, and their search patterns were becoming more systematic. The confrontation came in the Chamber of Echoes, a vast spherical room whose crystal walls amplified every sound into harmonic resonance. Damon had just finished freeing another group of hostages when Lord Kavik himself appeared at the chamber's main entrance, flanked by a dozen of his most trusted lieutenants. "The human hunter," Kavik said, his voice carrying the particular arrogance of someone who'd convinced himself he was righteous. "I wondered when you'd appear." Damon stepped into the chamber's center, his bow already strung and ready. "Let the princess go, Kavik. Your fight is with the Empire, not with her." "Is it?" Kavik's laugh echoed strangely in the crystal space. "She is the Empire, Mr. Cross, the living symbol of everything that's wrong with this galaxy. The privileged, few ruling over the many, making decisions about lives they've never lived. And your solution is to murder an innocent woman? My solution is to break the cycle, to show the galaxy that their so-called nobility bleeds and dies just like everyone else." Kavik gestured to his men, who began to spread out around the chamber's perimeter. "Though I admit I'm curious why a human bounty hunter would throw his life away for an alien princess. Maybe I just don't like bullies. Or maybe you're in love with her." Kavik's smile was cruel. How romantic. The beast and the beauty. Except, in this version, the beast dies at the end. The battle that followed was unlike anything Damon had ever experienced. The crystal chamber amplified every sound, turning the twang of his bowstring into a thunderous chord and a clash of weapons, into a symphony of violence. Kavik's men were skilled fighters, but they were used to conventional warfare, not the fluid, unpredictable style of a hunter who'd learned to kill in 100 different environments. Damon's arrows found their marks with mechanical precision, each shot carefully aimed to disable rather than kill when possible. But Kavik himself was another matter entirely. The rebel leader fought with the desperate fury of a true believer, his energy blade carving bright arcs through the air as he pressed his attack. The duel ranged across the chamber's curved walls, both men using the crystal formations as cover and platforms for their deadly dance. Kavik was younger and faster, but Damon had experience and the cold patience of someone who'd survived too many fights to count. The end came when Kavik overextended himself, lunging forward in a killing strike. That would have taken Damon's head off if it had connected. Instead, the hunter sidestepped at the last possible moment, letting the rebel leader's momentum carry him past, and put an arrow through his heart from point-blank range. Kavik fell to the crystal floor with a sound like breaking glass. His blood, pooling in the geometric patterns carved into the surface. Around the chamber, his surviving followers laid down their weapons in the face of Damon's unwavering aim. "The princess," Damon said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd just proven he was the most dangerous person in the room. "Where is she?" A climb to the Harmony spire seemed to take forever, though it was probably only minutes. Damon's heart hammered against his ribs as he ascended the final spiral staircase, each step bringing him closer to either salvation or devastation. He found her in the spire's highest chamber, a circular room whose transparent walls offered a panoramic view of the battle raging outside. Princess Valeria sat in the center of the space, her hands bound behind her back, her ethereal glow dim with exhaustion and despair. But when she looked up and saw him, that inner light blazed back to life like a star being born. "Damon," she whispered, his name carrying all the hope and disbelief and desperate love she'd been holding inside. "I'm here," he said, dropping to his knees beside her and cutting her bonds with his knife. "I'm here, and I'm getting you out." She threw her arms around him the moment her hands were free, and he felt that electric shock of contact amplified by her emotional state. Around them, the crystal walls began to resonate with harmonics that spoke of joy and relief and something deeper than either. "You came for me," she said against his neck, her voice broken with tears. I thought I was going to die without ever seeing you again." "Never," he said fiercely, holding her close enough to feel her heartbeat against his chest. "I'll always come for you, always." They might have stayed like that forever, lost in each other's arms while the battle raged below, but the sound of approaching footsteps broke the spell. Imperial guards appeared at the chamber's entrance, their weapons raised until they recognized the princess in Damon's arms. "Your Highness," the guard captain said, relief evident in his voice. "Are you injured?" "No," Valeria replied, though she didn't move from Damon's embrace. "Thanks to this man. The Queen is waiting for you in the secure bunker. We need to get you to safety immediately." Valeria finally pulled back to look at Damon's face, her luminous eyes searching his expression. "Come with me," she said. "Please, I can't go back to the way things were before. Valeria, ... I don't care about the politics or the scandal or what anyone thinks." Her voice carried a steel that reminded him she was royal blood, born to command. "I choose you, Damon Cross. I choose you over duty and sacrifice and what's best for the Empire. I choose you because you're what's best for me." The guard captain shifted uncomfortably, clearly out of his depth when it came to royal romance and political implications. "Your Highness, perhaps this conversation would be better held in private ... "No," Valeria said firmly. "I'm done with private conversations and secret meetings and pretending that what I want doesn't matter." She stood, pulling Damon up with her, and turned to face the guards with regal authority. "This man risked his life to save me, and before that he showed me what it means to have a choice. I'm making that choice now." The journey to the secure bunker passed in a blur of corridors and checkpoints, Imperial soldiers snapping to attention as they recognized their princess, but unable to hide their confusion at the human hunter who walked beside her. Word of their arrival had obviously preceded them, because Queen Seraphina was waiting in the bunker's main chamber when they arrived. The Queen was everything Damon had expected and nothing like he'd imagined. She had her daughter's ethereal beauty, but amplified by age and authority into something almost too bright to look at directly. Her presence filled the room like a physical force, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated in his bones. "Mr. Cross," she said, studying him with eyes that seemed to see through to his soul. "My daughter tells me you've become quite important to her, Your Majesty." Damon wasn't sure of the proper protocol for addressing alien royalty, so he settled. "For respectful directness, I came to help." "Yes, you did. At considerable risk to yourself, and with no promise of reward." The Queen's expression was unreadable. "Tell me, what do you hope to gain from this relationship with my daughter?" "Nothing," Damon replied honestly. "I don't want her crown or her title or her wealth. I just want her to be happy." "And you believe you can make her happy?" "I believe she deserves the chance to find out." Queen Seraphina was quiet for a moment, her luminous gaze moving between Damon and her daughter. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. "Do you know what the greatest burden of royalty is, Mr. Cross? It's not the responsibility or the weight of decision-making. It's the loneliness, the knowledge that everyone who approaches you wants something, and that your value to them is measured in what you can provide rather than who you are." She moved closer, and Damon caught a hint of the same impossible scent that clung to Valeria, ozone and dream flowers and starlight. "But you risked everything for her with no expectation of gain. You gave her something no one else ever has. Gift of choice." The Queen smiled, and it transformed her face into something warmer and more human. "That alone makes you worthy of consideration." "Mother," Valeria said, stepping forward to take Damon's hand, "I know what this means for the Empire. I know the political complications and the scandal it will cause. But I can't live my life for other people's expectations anymore. Can't you?" Queen Seraphine's voice carried a note of challenge. "Even if those expectations include the welfare of billions of people who depend on imperial stability." "The Empire survived the rebellion," Valeria replied. "It will survive my happiness too." The Queen studied them both for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But there will be conditions." The conditions, as it turned out, were both simpler and more complex than Damon had expected. He would undergo genetic modification to extend his lifespan to match Valeria's considerably longer one. He would learn ethereal customs and languages. He would accept a position as the princess's personal security chief, giving him official standing within the imperial hierarchy. Most importantly, he would prove himself worthy not just of Valeria's love, but of the trust of her people. Love alone is not enough to build a marriage that bridges two species, Queen Seraphina explained. You will need to become something more than human, just as she will need to become something more than ethereal. "I understand," Damon said. "Do you?" The Queen's smile was enigmatic. "We shall see." The months that followed were unlike anything Damon had ever experienced. He divided his time between intensive training in ethereal culture and working alongside Valeria to rebuild the parts of the Empire that had been damaged in the rebellion. It was exhausting work, but it gave them time to truly know each other beyond the adrenaline and desperation of their first encounters. He learned that Valeria was brilliant at economics and terrible at traditional music. She discovered that he had an unexpected talent for diplomatic negotiation and a complete inability to appreciate ethereal poetry. They fought about policy decisions and made up with passionate embraces that left the palace staff gossiping for days. Most importantly, they learned to trust each other with the small, vulnerable truths that lay beneath their public personas. She told him about the loneliness of growing up royal, the weight of constantly being watched and judged. He shared stories of his childhood on the frontier worlds, the poverty and violence that had shaped him into the man he'd become. Their wedding was nothing like the grand spectacle that had been planned with Lord Commander Theron. Instead, they exchanged vows in the rebuilt Crystal Cathedral, with only close friends and family in attendance. Queen Seraphina performed the ceremony herself, speaking words in the ancient ethereal tongue that seemed to make the very air shimmer with promise and possibility. Do you, Valeria Nethes, take this human to be your bondmate, to share your light with his darkness, and his strength with your wisdom? I do, Valeria replied, her voice clear and strong as her ethereal glow pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. And do you, Damon Cross, accept this joining of hearts and minds and souls, knowing that you pledge yourself not just to a woman, but to the responsibility she carries? I do, Damon said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. When they kissed to seal their vows, the cathedral filled with harmonic resonance that seemed to sing of new beginnings and impossible love made real. The sound carried across the capital city and beyond, a musical announcement that the galaxy had changed in ways both small and profound. Their first child was born 2 years later, a daughter with her mother's luminous eyes and her father's stubborn determination. She would grow up bilingual in human and ethereal languages, comfortable in both worlds and belonging fully to neither. But she would also grow up knowing that love could bridge any gap, overcome any obstacle, and create new possibilities where none had existed before. The galaxy watched their unusual family with fascination and sometimes disapproval, but gradually they became accepted as a symbol of what was possible when different species chose cooperation over conflict. Other mixed marriages followed, other bridges built between worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart.